Rochester Day. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful, wonderful Monday. We're live here on WYSL until 2 p.m. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show. 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. And of course, we're streaming online as well on the Free Solution Facebook page, Free Solution YouTube channel, Free Solution group, and the Kevin Wilson pages. And yeah, we're trying to get the podcast up too. I've been pretty good about that. Both the radio shows and the bonus show that Tim and I do online as well. So that show will be up. We put up a nice hour and a half show for you of last Thursday filled with fake news. So make sure you catch that. Subscribe to our podcast. Most podcast apps carry us. Just look for a Free Solution. You'll be able to find that. And all right, so today I want to talk about the some local issues, right? Like I'll try to tie back some of these issues to kind of like the broader perspective within New York State or within your other communities as well. But I want to make sure that we're covering some local issues that I think I didn't get a chance to discuss last week. So last week, Rochester City Council voted on their budget, and they vote on like a kind of a couple different budgets, right? Like there's the main budget that is for all of the city services, and then they also vote on a school budget. And I'm going to start with that, right? Because the school budget, I think, is the interesting part to me. It's no secret how I feel about my frustrations with the city school district. I live here. I have friends who send their kids to the district. Because I'm living here in the city, I'm like, well, do I send my kid to this district? My wife had gone to a city school and had a relatively good experience, but there's a worry about what is going on with the district and how that money is being used too, right? So again, if you don't know, the city of Rochester school district has they just spend just a massive amount of money at various points in time. It's been some of the highest spending per student in New York State, in a state where it's already very expensive to educate kids for one reason or another. Uh, Often, spending 20, 30, and now by some measures like $44,000 per student. And the latest budget is $1.1 billion, all in $1.1 billion for a district that is, as I understand it, kind of shrinking a bit, but they're spending just a massive, massive amount of money. And to put this in context too, like, well, is that a reasonable amount of money to spend? $44,000 per student? No, it is not. Not by any means is that a reasonable amount of money. The average in the country is closer to like $15,000 per student. A lot of private schools are around here are closer to that, far closer to that than they are to what the city district spends per student, and they're getting obviously better outcomes. Now, pro public school folks will say, well, the folks whose families have the resources to go to private school are better positioned to support their students in different ways and make sure that they are successful in school, whereas the poverty of the city school district, the mental health challenges, the trauma that some students face because of the violence of the district makes it inherently more expensive. But my goodness, how much more expensive it is. Just a wild amount of money that gets spent. And in that process of spending all that money, a lot of parents and community members are asking, well, is that money going towards the classroom? You hear progressives talk about all the time, like, well, our teachers don't get paid enough, or we don't have enough teachers, they don't have enough supplies, things like that. Okay, well, like in the city school district, what is that going towards? I think people could, you know, swallow that a little bit more if they knew that it was going towards, okay, well, these particular set of students need extra sets of support for these reasons, and that's why it's expensive. Again, I sort of get that, and I get that, like, maybe in some schools it's going to be more expensive because you're dealing with unique community needs that go unaddressed in other places, right? Even though that ends up becoming a really, really convenient excuse for people who have no interest in changing the system because either consciously or unconsciously they're acting in a way that benefits them. and in a way that doesn't serve students well. Again, what I mean specifically by this is, what was going towards administrative fees, what are going towards, um, just chasing after grants, what are going towards compliance, what are going towards all that stuff versus building maintenance versus teacher salaries versus support staff salaries, all that stuff, the classroom supplies, like what, and then the contract makes sense. There's so much bloat here that finally, even in a democratic city like Rochester, where I think the perception outside of Rochester is that, well, gosh, they're Democrats, they're just gonna rubber stamp this stuff. They didn't. They unanimously voted down approving the city's portion of the school budget. Now, this doesn't actually matter. And you're thinking like, okay, two weird things are going on here. One, why is the city council voting on this anyway? Don't other people vote on it? If you don't live in the city, maybe you don't realize that we don't actually get to vote on the school budget in the city. That we like what all you did in May. If you live outside of the city or outside, one of the big districts in New York State, is you go and vote up or down on whatever budget your school board gives you. We don't do that. Money comes in from New York State. The school district makes their own budget, and then that gets approved by, the state, and then the city residents contribute some portion of that to the city district through our property taxes, just like everyone else. And in theory, city council is supposed to vote on that. But just because they vote it down does not necessarily mean that that money won't get spent and taken from us. And I know it sounds bizarre, but that's kind of how it works. So they voted down their portion of the budget, which is like $121 million or something like that, and as part of a like $1.1 billion budget, and it doesn't matter. But to their credit, again, we'll give credit where credit's due. Is the Rochester City Council's like, listen, there's a bunch of unanswered questions. You're increasing spending, and you are not being clear with parents or stakeholders in city council or other community stakeholders, like what is this money being used for? How are COVID funds being used? How are, how is all this extra assistance being used in the district to actually benefit children? Because again, keep in mind, city of Rochester graduation rates, I think last year the 4-year graduation rate was like 71%, something like that. That was considered a very, very good year to have 71% of students graduating in the city. Since living here, it's gone down below 50% at times. Just absolutely abysmal. And again, while spending more per student than almost any other place. It's not, even with the increased needs of students in this area, if you're making that argument, like it's not acceptable to have so many kids drop out. And part of the reason it's gone up higher is because they've created alternative paths to do that. They've increased the region's graduation rate, but they've also increased the number of students you get through alternative paths. So there's some improvement there. Okay, but it's still well below what you'd see in many other places. So you get to all this stuff. Now you've heard all this context, right? Again, what ends up happening? Again, we're still going to spend $1.1 billion on the school district. That's money coming from not just us in Rochester, but people all over New York State. That's again how some of the big districts are funded in New York State is we get state money. And what level of accountability is there? What is possible? Again, even when folks get elected to city council, to reject that part of the budget, and you might not agree with everything that they do, and I often don't, but they're rejecting this. Say, hey, this isn't okay. Like, how do we hold the district accountable for money that our residents are paying in? They're saying no. How do we and then we have the school board elections, but that doesn't seem to move things forward. There have been staffing problems at the district. There's been financial mismanagement at the district that is incredibly serious, and now there's also an investigation there as well. The Securities Exchange Commission is investigating the city school district too. I guess it has something to do with when they were selling bonds, right? There's some uh basically taking on debt, right? They sell their bonds, and they weren't as forthcoming as the SEC, or they're accused of not being as forthcoming as the SEC wanted them to be about the actual financial situation of the district. Therefore, they are maybe not, again, they're misrepresenting the risk with the people and the institutions who have bought those bonds. So they've got that going for them too. So with all this, again, where do we go from here? How do we address this issue in cities like this? And I know I promise I'll bring this back to other types of districts too, but Rochester's unique. How do we address situations like this? Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. If you want to weigh in on this, give us a call, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovation should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Hey, this is Kevin Wilson, host of A Free Solution. You ever need a tool for just one project, but didn't want to spend the cash for something you'd use just once or twice? Well, there's a new tool library in Rochester where you can borrow just the thing you need instead of buying a new one. It's called the Tool Shed from the Southeast Area Coalition, and membership starts at just $25 a year. Use it for home projects or to support your business. Learn more and become a member at seektoolshed.org. That's SEAC toolshed.org.
As a veteran of the United States military, I can finally get the opportunity to enjoy special events, things that we couldn't afford, thanks to VetTix. Every empty seat at a concert, a game, or a play is a missed opportunity to say thanks to a veteran and service member. We can give our veterans a special event where they too can create their own cherished memories. Visit vettix.org. Find out how you can make a difference in a veteran's life.
Only available in the WYSL store at WYSL1040.com. Official top quality tees, hoodies, and coffee mugs depicting the colorful WYSL logo or the already famous Mount Worstmore line of merch depicting Mount Rushmore style are for worst presidents. Of course, you know who is front and center up on that mountain. WYSL official items make perfect gifts, or they're a great way for you to make a personal statement. Locally produced and sold only in the WYSL store at WYSL1040.com.
A Free Solution on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, host today. Thanks again for joining us on this wonderful, wonderful Monday. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show. We're live here until 2 p.m. here on WYSL and all of our streaming channels. 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. Or leave your comments online too. That is perfectly fine as well. We're talking about the Rochester City School District and what happened in, again, a rare moment of, I think, unified push for accountability in the district. The city council voted to not approve the city's portion of that. And I think I said it was 121 million, it was 119 million. And yeah, no, that's it. Again, it's not gonna make a difference. It's weird that the city of Rochester doesn't work like that in New York State. And there's several other cities, like I think like Albany and Buffalo are the same way too. A couple others. And it's like a state funded thing, right? That's their way of trying to ensure more equity in areas where there are fewer property tax receipts per child, and try to make up some budget for areas with higher need, right? Like that's, again, I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm saying that that's kind of, as I understood it, like part of the justification for the big districts getting that state funding and working a bit differently than what many of you might be experiencing, and I grew up in a town that had this too, where you go and you vote on the school budgets in May. So again, in this case, like, unfortunately, there's only a couple revenues or avenues where we can start to address this, like in the city, right? And again, if you live in another city, you might be experiencing some of these same frustrations. The first thing is, okay, so you can try to vote out people on the school boards who are not living up to their fiduciary responsibility. They're not acting in a way that best serves the interest of all the stakeholders in the district. I get that you need to serve the employees and keep those in mind too, but the ultimate outcome, the ultimate goal of a school district is supposed to be the education of children, right? Like, again, if we're gonna concede the concept of like public schools are necessary, like that's what it's supposed to do. Again, a bunch of folks will come in and say they're gonna do that, so make all sorts of promises, and oftentimes it doesn't happen. And they're unfortunately, again, they're places like teachers unions will end up backing folks who reinforce the status quo. In many cases they would argue differently, I know, but but to me, that's how I see it. And again, end up serving the needs of a bloated administration. You get to a point where bureaucracy ends up building a sort of momentum that is hard to pull apart, right? Again, libertarians and small government conservatives realize this. It's not just a school district problem. It's a problem that exists everywhere in government. Once you start to build out a bureaucracy, it's hard to pull that apart. There becomes all these small reasons to keep people around. Either you don't want to look like you're firing people. You don't want to look like you're cutting jobs. Again, these are people who are doing the day in, day out work of like whatever you're supposed to be overseeing. For better or worse, that's how people end up approaching this. It's like, oh, we don't want to cut jobs. Okay. Or, it's these constituencies fight hard to keep their positions, and they're going to care about it a lot more than you do. Again, you may think you care about it, but like, this is their job, this is their livelihood. They're going to make a passionate case to the actual decision makers that they need to stay around because their little function that they do is incredibly important, and they're going to passionately explain to you why it is, or they're going to get a union to do it on their behalf, whichever it is. And then suddenly that's the justification for keeping dozens and dozens of full-time employees on the payroll, and then they're hard to get rid of. And I don't mean to say that there aren't folks who mean well and are trying to do a great thing. And again, I'm sure you could explain why your job is important, but this is how bureaucracy doesn't shrink, even when it's gotten bloated beyond control. Once you do that, once you concede that, it's going to be there for a while. And so we have that too. And there are some folks who are pushing just in terms of a quality education side, and what choices parents have. There are folks who are pushing for things like, charter schools. But those are pretty rare. It's again something that the progressives and the unions are very much against. Charter schools, they say it's like, oh, it's privatization with public money and there's less accountability, blah blah blah. I'm like, which blows my mind. Again, there's no accountability now. Like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, we're not going to have accountability if we have charter schools. What, like, the schools in my neighborhood are filled with violence and often, again, failing students who struggle to get through the process. And again, I don't know what the state of it is this year, but are students being pushed through? Are they getting the quality education they need to go out and be able to actually participate in the workforce successfully? My guess is probably not. No, knowing what I know about the district and what I know about, like, as much as I know about education generally. Are students coming out prepared for this? So again, what is the solution to this? Is you could hope for an electoral solution, which you would need change at the school board level, and you need change at the state level. All the incentives and funding et cetera, that goes through that. The bad incentives that get pushed through both New York State and also on the federal level too, through the Department of Education. All these bad incentives end up reinforcing the status quo in many cases. And again, I'm not talking about curriculum at this point. I'm just talking about, like, can kids come out of the high school experience with adequate skills to jump into the workforce? And the answer is often no. Colleges are doing remedial education to catch them up to get a degree that may or may not be necessary, helpful either, but that is what it is. And so I think, like, really, I think, like, the only way to get around this is to start to opt out again, to build structures that exist outside of that. Again, I sort of like the idea of charter schools. I think that they're a well-meaning effort. Um, I'm not against them. I think that's part of it again, but in order to get that public funding, in order to support charter schools, in order to have that process where funding follows students, it's going to be a long electoral cycle, particularly in New York State. There are other states that are moving in that direction, and I hope it works. I hope they succeed. I see Republicans and Democrats starting to push back more on their candidates and kick out candidates in the primary process who aren't supportive of alternative models of education that allow for greater parent choice. Like, it's great to see some of that stuff. I think we're a long way off from that in New York State, but for now, until it's a great enough threat to the public education system, it's probably gonna have to be like a homeschool thing. Like that's the only direction I see this going, is that we're gonna have to just, like, opt out of the system if you want a quality education. Again, I know some kids go through and they're great. My wife had gone through that system, and she generally had a good time once she got into one of the special schools in Rochester. One the School of the Arts is where she ended up going. Which, again, if you're in the city, you kind of know, like, there's a whole selection process for that, and that's controversial in its own right. Is that end up self-selecting for students who are more successful, or is this a model that could be applied to students who didn't? It's a whole thing here too, whether or not, like, that's a model that works. But again, that was a school, and there's a few of them in Rochester, which are great, where you have to actually apply to get in, and that's that's a good thing. Again, that can get more students successfully through the system. But again, so many folks are rejecting that because they're worried that you may end up with disparate outcomes over whatever demographic information that you're measuring, right? Does that make a difference? And is it the model itself of the curriculum of the school, or is it the pedagogical model, or is it the people going into it that matter? These are discussions that people are having. Again, if you have a charter school system, if you're accepting public schools as the way we have to go, if you have a charter school system, you can have greater experimentation with that stuff. And parents can go and advocate for the models that they think are going to work best for the children. And if it doesn't work, switch. And if they find the school is having problems, or if they're finding that the classrooms aren't up to what they're looking for, you can switch. That's the goal, is to make schools look more like markets. Like, no one makes me go and buy at Wegmans or Tops or Walmart or whatever. No one makes me do that. I get my choice. I have my preferences based on different things. But if I want to go and shop at a new store tomorrow, I can do that. How can we do that more with education? Thanks again for joining us here on A for Solution. Appreciate y'all listening today. Give us a call if you want to participate. 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
celebrating 35 years.
WYSL.
AM 1040 Avon Rochester, FM 92.1 Rochester, and FM 95.5 Spencerport.
Here's the latest forecast from the News 10 NBC Weather Center for tonight. We'll see mostly cloudy skies, chance for a passing shower to a warm front will make its way through the region. Temps stay near 60 on Tuesday. We'll see sun and clouds, chance of a pop-up shower. Storm generally dry, but noticeably hotter and more humid. Temps mid and upper 80s. We could be near 90 hazy, humid degrees on Wednesday with a chance of some thunderstorms. I'm Rich Canilia, WYSL.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
In the wake of the firebombing of Compass Care's medical office in Buffalo by pro-abortion terrorists last Tuesday, June 7th, Joe Biden and New York Governor Hochul refused to denounce the violence. At least 24 pro-life pregnancy centers across the country have been attacked. Adding insult to injury, Hochul signed a bill on Monday, June 13th, investigating pro-life pregnancy centers, attacking the victims instead of investigating the arsonists. Compass Care CEO Jim Harden says, as far as we can tell, 0 federal or state resources have been allocated to protect pro-life pregnancy centers. It appears pro-life politicians are only interested in protecting those who agree with them. Harden goes on to say this frivolous bill only robs women of the health care and resources they deserve by diverting precious resources to appease investigators. Compass Care has no intention of cooperating with this injustice. RealAbortionNews.com update is sponsored by Compass Care.
Summertime, and the savings are easy. When you shop Victor Chevrolet, you'll get that warm, comfortable feeling when you lease a 2022 Chevy Trailblazer LT for just $229 a month for 24 months. $3,609 cash or trade equity at closing. If you need a pickup, get the versatility of a 2022 Chevy Silverado Custom LTD Crew Cab for just $319 a month for 24 months. $4,589 cash or trade equity at closing. A 22 Chevy Equinox all-wheel drive LT, only $279 a month for 36 months. $2,500 cash or trade equity at closing. These lease deals include returning lessee rebate. All factory rebates, incentives, and discounts are applied. Security deposit is waived. 10,000 mile allowance per year, 25 cents each additional mile. Must have lease and household. Tier 1 credit approval required. Lessee responsible for repair and maintenance. Conditions apply. Get details at dealer. Victor Chevrolet has a used selection that can't be beat. Whether it's a Chevy or not, trust your vehicle to our Chevy certified service department. Come see how easy it is to do business with us. Find new roads at Victor Chevrolet, Route 96 in Victor. Visit victorchevrolet.com.
From your friends at GCC, claim your Genesee Promise Plus Summer Tuition Scholarship and earn up to 6 SUNY College credits during GCC summer sessions, which start July 5th. Call 1-866-CALL-GCC for more information or go to genesee.edu/promise and apply today. Your time is now.
Empowering communities one relationship at a time is our commitment at Tompkins. Our customers have thrived thanks to our focus on local lending and their commitment to the customers they serve.
Tompkins helped us to finance the purchase of our beautiful new 8,000 square foot building.
Tompkins has always been there for us.
We see a long relationship with Tompkins. They're good people.
Tompkins, banking, insurance, wealth. Member FDIC Equal Housing Lender. Investment and insurance products are not FDIC insured, not bank guaranteed, and may lose value.
WYSL. Alpine Manor Assisted Living in Lima has a part-time opening for a cook to produce home-style meals for 15 senior citizen residents. These simple meals consist of one entree with no special diet requirements. Position is 2 days per week, plus every other weekend. Prep cook candidates will be considered. Call 346-5880 for details about being a part-time cook at Alpine Manor. Make some extra cash and meet some great people. Again, that's 346-5880 for Alpine Manor.
A free solution on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Thanks again for joining us here on this wonderful, wonderful Monday. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. Or leave your comments online. We got Shelly listening on YouTube saying, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Shelly. Thanks for listening today. Appreciate it. Always good to have you here. And everyone else too. And again, all the places to listen online, the Free Solution Facebook page, Free Solution YouTube channel, Free Solution group, Kevin Wilson Facebook page, Kevin Wilson Twitter, and of course the podcast. Search for that anywhere. We got bonus content up there too, just for the folks who listen online. We do me and Tim O'Connor. If you remember when we used to do Fake News Fridays, we do a Thursday evening show now. And sounds like we have a caller on the line too. John from Rochester. John, welcome to Free Solution. What's on your mind?
Hey, Kevin. Yeah, your topic on city schools, the city Rochester schools, is kind of timely. I actually did a study probably going back 12 years ago. I updated it 5 or 6 years ago. I presented it to a professional group a couple times, and was printed in the New York Real Estate Journal. I was also on a radio show in WBEN out of Buffalo talking about this study. Basically, I looked at upstate New York, kind of focused on Rochester, and compared Rochester to Birmingham, Alabama, Richmond, Virginia, and Charlotte, North Carolina. And I made the assumption that if you bought a property, each of those 4 areas, Rochester, Richmond, Charlotte, and Birmingham, Alabama, which are kind of similar in demographics and sizes, your net worth, if you owned a house for 20 years, would be approximately $200,000 higher in those 3 areas versus Rochester. And the reason being, a lot had to do with real estate taxes, and some to appreciation of the real estate. But real estate taxes and the opportunity cost you would have, because your taxes would be much lower over that 20-year period in those in those areas. And it was kind of ironic or surprising that you hear that, the New York schools are much superior to Florida or Virginia, Alabama, and North Carolina. But in fact, I found that the high school graduation rates were actually higher in those other 3 states. Their ACT and SAT scores were very comparable. And it was kind of surprising that the quality of education seemed to be pretty equal in those 3 states compared to New York State. Yet the top property taxes were outrageous.
Yeah. Again, paying more in taxes and spending more per student is not necessarily correlated with better outcomes. And gosh, we sure do a lot of that in New York State, and it doesn't necessarily lead to students who are better prepared to either enter the workforce or go to college and not need to catch up to where colleges expect their students to be.
And I know the graduation rates have gone up quite a bit in Rochester, and also the city of Buffalo, as an example. But I have to wonder, did they lower the bar to get to those rates? I would suspect yes. I don't know what you have heard.
Yeah. I'd have to look it up again, and I kind of mentioned this earlier. So they did create some more alternative like paths to get through that don't involve a student getting a Regents diploma. Although I guess that did go up a little bit this past year or last year. They have data for that there are more students getting Regents diplomas, but there are alternative paths where the school district can say, well, our graduation rate is this, but it's not exactly comparing apples to apples from the graduation rate being like 47% back in like 2013 or whatever it was.
Now, did you? I didn't hear. Maybe you mentioned it. My guess is that the cost per student has got to exceed $30,000 per student in the city of Rochester. Is that? Do you have a handle on that at all?
Yeah. So I think last year it was. I saw one measure that said it was like $33,000. There's another measure that says, with the estimated student populations coming in next year and the $1.1 billion budget overall, plus, other money that's expected to come in, it could be up to $44,000 per student all told, again, coming from various places and whatnot. So if that ends up shaking out to be true, again, that's something like 3 times the national average spent per student in public schooling. It's huge.
Yeah, when I did these studies, the differential in taxes were on an annual basis, and that included not only school but other municipal taxes. But it was outrageous. It was just unbelievably disparate.
Yeah, and just again, keep in mind that in Rochester, again, some of that is subsidized by like the state, right? So it's not just us paying property taxes. It doesn't make it better. In some ways, it kind of makes it worse. But that is something to keep in mind. Like my property tax rate is not necessarily associated with what we're spending on schools in the city.
What's ironic, when the Erie County county taxes are significantly lower than they are in Monroe County. One of the reasons is Joel Giambra, who was a county executive back in the, let's say, boy, time flies, maybe 15, 20 years ago, when he got elected, he ran on the basis of he's going to reduce the county tax rate. And he got elected, and he did it. He was able to reduce the county tax substantially. To this day, it kind of held to a certain extent. The problem was they had to go to a financial control board because they didn't have enough revenue to pay the expenses. But that's what he wanted to accomplish. Or I don't know if he wanted to do that, but I think in the long run it worked out well because they didn't have enough revenue to substantiate the expenses. So they went to a financial control board that kept the lid on expenses, which I think at the time I actually talked to Maggie Brooks and Mayor Johnson to put that idea forth. Go to a financial control board to control the expenses of the city and the county. Of course, they didn't agree with me.
No, and here's the challenging part. This is an excuse for like county leaders anywhere, past or present, but like there's so many unfunded mandates from the state too. It's like there's a whole bunch of stuff that they have to pay for, and there's some counties in New York State where like their own like optional expenses are barely anything, and almost the entirety of their budget is eaten up by stuff that New York State requires them to do. So there's very little flexibility in some of those cases. So it's like you can't lower the taxes because if not, you won't be meeting your obligations that New York State says you have to do as a county. You're stuck.
The cool thing about a financial control board is in Erie County, for instance, they had the same mandate. What they did, and not only the Erie County, but also the city of Buffalo, they were under different financial control boards. And the financial control board has a lot of power. They were able to negate some union contracts, and they were able to reduce the overhead and wages of the unions in the county and the city of Buffalo, and that went a long way.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you can do that, that's huge. Again, it's getting around the ability, the requirement to have to negotiate with a public sector union. Now, I've said this before, I think private sector unions are great. Public sector unions, I'm a lot more skeptical of because it's not getting a share of the profit. It's getting a share of money extracted from us taxpayers without necessarily providing that additional value. And there's a lot of really bad incentives for unions to take and take and take and take again. And why wouldn't they? The structure's there for them to do it, and their members expect them to. So
even
you need,
FDR was against public sector unions. That's
he was for that reason.
Exactly. I mean, what better way to negotiate if you have control over the legislation and the budget in New York State, and yet your staff and the legislators, to a certain extent, have unions.
Yeah, and again, if they can extract that revenue that's taken from taxpayers, again, it's not about providing additional value, it's just about extracting more from taxpayers, and then they can turn around and use some of that money too that's given to their members and use it to lobby to, again, do more of that. It ends up being a scheme. And again, it's not that they're not fighting for good causes in some cases, but a lot of times it's not a share of the profits, it's a share of what needs to be extracted from the productive economy.
And look at what look what the public employee unions have done in New York State, and look what the education unions have done to the school, the city schools in Buffalo, Utica, Rochester, whatever. It's they've damaged them.
Yeah,
they're so powerful that that's one thing I liked about Mayor Warren was she was a big advocate of charter schools. She recognized, in fact, that's one of the problems she had with the Democratic Party was she was against, to a certain extent, she was for charter schools, and they had a huge problem with that, and that she was not very popular in Democratic circles.
No, that creates some friction for sure. And again, it makes, there's all these institutional stakeholders that make actual reform nearly impossible because they have full-time employees, full-time staffs, people who are dedicated day in, day out to make sure that the status quo is preserved. And in fact, their share of that is increased in many cases. So, again, what's the average parent supposed to do going up against that system? Again, you can organize a campaign. Sometimes it works, but a lot of times it's overwhelming.
Well, I used to go to school board meetings. I don't anymore, but I used to go to a lot of school board meetings and talk against the budget at budget time, and I used to get booed quite a bit because I would be the only person that would be advocating for a lower budget. It was, and some of the school board members, both in the city and in the towns that I went to, actually liked me coming in because it got kind of boring when everybody's focusing on higher budgets, not lower budgets. So
yeah. Well, I don't know. Some of the attitudes when you say something, I was like, "Boo! Why do you hate kids?" I'm like, "Oh, come on! You got to have some level of responsibility here. Like this is hurting our residents, and not if you're not showing me how it's actually benefiting like the education of our children, then what are we doing it for? Like who's gaining from this?"
Well, listen, Kevin, it was good to talk to you. Great show.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much for calling in, John. And again, folks, if you want to call in too, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000, or leave your comment online. Thanks again for joining us. We're going to be back here on A Free Solution in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
The WYSL store is now open. With nicer weather, your car needs an official Voice of Liberty bumper sticker. There's a great selection to help you show your love of God, the Constitution, and free and safe schools. Here are just a few available. Shut Up, Fauci, Kathy Hochul, Save America, Support the Second Amendment, Scam Alert, January 6th, God, Please Help Us, Close the Mexican Border, Save America, Stop Voting for Democrats. And there are gas pump stickers reading, Democrats did this. These are standard weather-resistant bumper stickers guaranteed to get you horn honks and thumbs up in traffic. Choose from other locally made WYSL Voice of Liberty merch too, like tees, hoodies, drinkware, and more. Perfect gifts for any Liberty lover. Check out the exclusive WYSL Mount Worstmore shirts, hoodies, and coffee mugs depicting our 4 worst presidents. Guess who's front and center? Shop the WYSL store at WYSL1040.com.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Hey, this is Kevin Wilson, host of A Free Solution. You ever need a tool for just one project, but didn't want to spend the cash for something you'd use just once or twice? Well, there's a new tool library in Rochester where you can borrow just the thing you need instead of buying a new one. It's called the Tool Shed from the Southeast Area Coalition, and membership starts at just $25 a year. Use it for home projects or to support your business. Learn more and become a member at seektoolshed.org. That's SEAC toolshed.org.
A free solution on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Thanks again for joining us on this wonderful, wonderful Monday. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000 if you want to call in like John did. We're live until 2 o'clock, so we got a few more minutes left to call in if you want to weigh in. I've mostly been talking about the Rochester City School District today, the budget, the city council voting down their portion of the budget, and again what we can do about it. And let me just I've been kind of negative on like the electoral possibilities of holding particularly districts like the city of Rochester School District accountable, because again it is tough because there's so many competing factions in this that like the most direct way to get out of this system is to just find market alternatives to education, because they are out there. There are homeschool bonds in groups, and in private schools and whatnot. There are some alternatives out there, and it feels a little bit unfair to have to pay my taxes and then still pay for my child's education. Okay, but like if you truly want to opt out, and again, there's it's wild to me when I hear parents are like, oh yeah, you should send your kids to the school district, like because like we don't want to support our public schools. Okay, well, do you do that? Well, no, it was violent and the education was bad. Well, okay, great, yeah, that's that's exactly why I'm considering, we got a few years to figure it out, but I'm considering not sending them to public schools. And again, just right down the street from me at one of the high schools that I can not quite see from my house, but it's pretty close to me. There's a 100-person fight and someone pulled out a gun and didn't shoot this time, but they hit someone with it, ended up locking down the school. So you hear about stuff like that, and you're like, man, like, do you want to put your child into that system? It's tough. Again, a lot of kids don't have a choice. Their parents don't care. They're just, yeah, whatever. Like, you're going to school because you have to. Like, we don't care, and that's sad. I feel bad for that, and I want to find better alternatives for those kids too, and find ways for them to advocate for their own education. And it's tough. The system we have right now is not amenable to change, but every once in a while it does change. There are things that happen that get so overwhelming where you get a groundswell of activism to overturn that. It happened actually in San Francisco, right? Like even among the progressive of progressive capitals, right? Like in San Francisco, not too long ago, they booted out a big chunk of their school board because they weren't doing much to actually address the issues of education, both the quality and getting kids back in the classroom, because they're still struggling with the COVID restrictions that they imposed upon themselves. And again, a lot of the staff, teachers, etc., didn't want to go back, but a lot of parents were like, my kid needs to get back in the classroom. Like, and this is what what keeps him connected to his friends, and what keeps him or her learning the social and emotional skills they need to survive. It's what keeps them, engaged in the learning process. And they focused on like renaming schools away from like, what they had some ridiculous ones. It's like they renaming schools instead of being like founding fathers' names or like important people in California and San Francisco history schools. They renamed them to someone else because they had some past transgression or whatever, and they focus on that sort of stuff. And again, that's not what is exactly happening in the city school district. Is failure on a more fundamental level here in Rochester, but there does come a breaking point, even for the ideologically committed, and even for the partisan at the local level. People at some point say, we need to actually do something about this. There needs to be some accountability. It doesn't matter what your party affiliation is or your ideological priors are. At some point, even the far left gets to a breaking point and says, okay, we need it. And again, this is what we sort of see in the city of Rochester. Politics are not quite what they are on the national level in the city of Rochester. There's factions and different types of conservatism. There's all sorts of complicated factors that go into this. But again, I was happy to see that at least stamp of disapproval, even if it doesn't ultimately fix the problem, the stamp of disapproval from the political establishment and folks from across the spectrum that exists within the city of Rochester Democratic Party to say, hey, this is messed up. And maybe that's a first sign that there's enough parents mad about this thing to address this issue. Now, again, am I optimistic about an electoral solution to this? No, not really. I still think it has to be, we're going to find ways to fundamentally circumvent that system. Again, it's going to come through people doing innovative things through combination of like online learning in private programs and homeschooling pods and other private schools and things that take a new approach, a new mold to education. That's what I think is going to end up happening, because we're seeing it all over. The number of students who are now homeschooled or moving to private schools or moving to the homeschool pods, things like that. That's what I think is going to happen. Now, I didn't end up getting to I ended up actually meaning to talk about the city of Rochester budget too. They had a few things there, like the making Juneteenth official, which Juneteenth I think is a nice holiday. I like Juneteenth. When the last of the slaves legally were had heard about their emancipation. I think it's a nice thing to celebrate, that people being free. It's great. So City of Rochester made it official to do Juneteenth celebrations day. They also canceled Columbus Day. Again, this cultural thing. I don't care that much about Columbus Day. Columbus is not a great, but they replaced it with Indigenous Peoples Day. So that's whatever. And then they had their whole budget, which again, I intended to get into the police budget side, the folks who opposed the budget because of police funding, which is still up at like $91 million. It's still pretty high, despite a cut last year. And so maybe I'll get into that on Wednesday's show. We'll see. And again, the school district thing though is something that I want to keep watching. I want to see if people can push this further, if it's a political moment where there's going to be actual accountability in the district, or if we keep doing the same thing that we do over and over and over again. But again, appreciate the engagement in today's show. I'll be back on Wednesday. Hope everyone has a wonderful week. Take care.